A few thoughts today in the sermon title, Buckle Up, against the backdrop of that passage that we listened to that Cheryl read for us. I doubt whether there are many people listening to me now that will know the name Chris Hani. A few of us who lingered on during our adult study opportunity on Tuesday evening may perhaps remember it. I mentioned his name. Chris Hani was assassinated in South Africa on the morning of April 10, 1993, in the driveway of his home in Boksburg. At 10:20 that morning, 10:20, April 10, 1993. Don Park was the suburb in which Chris Hani lived. Chris Hani was a leadership figure in South Africa, and a very important one at that stage. He was regarded as the natural successor of Nelson Mandela and was groomed to be that in the future. He was the Secretary General of the South African Communist Party, which always, until to this day, forms an important part of the African National Congress, the ruling party. They don't put people up for election, but they constitute an important part and play an important role in the African National Congress in South Africa. Chris Hani was also the Chief of Staff of the armed or the military wing of the African National Congress. It was called Umkhonto weSizwe, which is, if you translate it, which means the spear of the nation. And the African National Congress, Nelson Mandela was the most prominent and well-known figure in that, was a non-violent organization when it was founded in 1912. But in 1959, Nelson Mandela started Umkhonto weSizwe, deviated and changed the organization to someone that embraced military operations and violent resistance, contrary to its non-violent stance up to that stage. So Chris Hani filled all these important positions. He was assassinated by a Polish immigrant, Janusz Walus, with a 9mm standard issue 9mm pistol. A few shots to the body, one in his head. His 15-year-old daughter witnessed what happened. She opened the door when she heard her father's car in the driveway. By 7 o'clock that evening, Walus was arrested. And he was arrested because of the actions of a stay-at-home mom that lived in the neighborhood. And if you didn't know Chris Hani's name, nobody would have ever heard of Margaretha Harmse, an Afrikaans-speaking stay-at-home mom who thought she saw something suspicious, remembered the registration number of the vehicle, the plate, and called the police. And a sergeant just doing his regular police job, Sergeant Detective Holmes at the Boksburg police station, not a glamorous job by any description. He just did his ordinary job, and due to the information that Margaretha Harmse provided, they were able to arrest Janusz Walus, the assassin, at 7 o'clock. that evening, as I said. I don't think what I've relayed to you makes much sense to any American, or for that matter, any South African at this stage. But for us who lived through the South African experience or process, that assassination of Chris Hani was immense. I remember when I heard it, I just thought to myself, what stupidity, what utter insanity. Because after about 5 decades of violent resistance, or make it 3 decades, we were moving towards a negotiated process with a democratic election at the end of that. And Chris Hani, the commander of the military wing, was going around South Africa preaching peace and reconciliation, especially in this specific time when the violence between Inkatha, the Zulu nationalist movement, and the African National Congress, when it was reaching its peak with killings by the hundreds, extreme violence on a large scale everywhere. And this man was now assassinated. And I thought, this is the straw that will break the camel's back. This is what will ignite the powder keg. And everything will be blown up and we will return to this time intense civil war. And it won't only be bombings and limpet mines and landmines on the roads, but this will be all-out war. Situations like that are often much more complex than we would like it to be, and I think this was also the case. But in retrospect, and having been part of that situation, looking back at it, I think what played a very important role, perhaps the critical role, was the leadership of Nelson Mandela, who also embraced peace and non-violence and rejected military operations now. After he started the military wing, became a man of peace now. Nelson Mandela spoke up on national TV channels that evening. And I want to read you what he said, a quote from that address to the South African nation. Tonight, I'm reaching out to every single South African, black and white, from the very depths of my being. A white man full of prejudice and hate came to our country and committed a deed so foul that our whole nation now teeters on the brink of disaster. A white woman of Afrikaner origin risked her life so that we may know and bring to justice this assassin. The cold-blooded murder of Chris Hani has sent shock waves through the country and the world. Now is the time for all South Africans to stand together against those who, from any quarter, wish to destroy what Chris Hani gave his life for, the freedom of all of us. The words of Nelson Mandela, who, after transforming the nonviolent movement to embrace violence and then returning to nonviolence again to become one of the most important elements in the process that led to a peaceful transition in South Africa and to a democratic election. There was also, as I've said, the actions of ordinary people. Margarethe Harms, a stay-at-home mom, who did her civic duty when seeing something that she thought was suspicious and report that to the police. There was Detective Sergeant Holmes, who followed up on the lead, who did his duty, and Janus Wallus was arrested. It saved South Africa from lapsing into full-scale civil war. It changed the direction of world history. And I'm sharing this with you from my own history from the country where our family immigrated from, to speak a word of caution and also a word of hope in the times that we find ourselves in. I think America also finds itself in a precarious time and a precarious moment with an election that will take place within a few weeks. I listened to conversations of our people that belong to the congregation, but also to people that are just members of society, members of this community. I read what I can in the papers, and especially in the commentary of letters. And what I hear and what I read is great concern, great alarm. And rightfully so, because we have experienced and observed actions. We've experienced and observed and heard things being said that would be unimaginable in the past. There is no way that I could have imagined that in the United States, whom we returned to after 6 years in New Zealand because of our love for this country, that I would be hearing and reading about an attempted overthrow of the state government of Michigan, for instance. I hear people blithely speaking about armed insurrection. I see people parading with their big guns everywhere. I cannot believe this is America. But I also believe we have so much that can give us hope, that it is not right for us to revert to despair, to alarm. And even those circumstances now interrogate us and our value system and ask of us what our real ethics are and what the framework is that we will continue to embrace, especially in the weeks ahead and probably a few months after the election as well. That's why I chose the sermon title, Buckle Up. We have to see reality as it presents itself and not live in a dream world and say, nothing is wrong. Everything will just be fine. We can just continue to enjoy the beautiful fall colors and, you know, do regular Halloween and everything will be fine. We listened to the passage about building on the rock and building on the sand. The house that is hurricane proof and the one that gets washed away and destroyed by the storm. It follows after a series of teachings of Jesus that were probably not spoken in the way that it is presented to us by the author of the Gospel of Matthew, but collected and structured in that way and now presented to us. It speaks, preceding this passage in the series of teachings about the Golden Rule, among other things. It speaks about knocking on the door and asking. And then this important passage that says, if you listen to these teachings and you act on them, you act according to these teachings, then you will be like the house that was built on rock. A house that is built on the bedrock of what Jesus manifested and what he taught and what he lived. That bedrock of the source of all compassion and all life, the bedrock of the love of God. So Jesus is saying, hear these teachings. They are fine. But you have to act on them. You have to be what I taught you about. You have to manifest it. You have to make it real in the world. There is a call for us to accept responsibility. There is a call for us to display leadership in this era that we find ourselves in. There is a call for leadership to accept responsibility, leadership in the highest offices of this nation, to act and speak responsibly, to realize that words have consequences, and to realize it is easy to destroy in a moment or in moments of insanity what has been built up through labors of love over many decades or even centuries. It is easy to destroy all of that very easily. More so, there is a duty and a responsibility on all of us to heed the call of Jesus here as well, this time in the United States, in this community and in the world. To assume our responsibility and to act according to the source of our being, the ground of compassion, to embrace justice and to seek peace. Not to say everything should stay in this beautiful land as it is, because change is necessary to bring about a just system. And so often I hear, I can't do anything about this. It is impossible for me to change anything. And I want to ask you to remember the name of two South Africans that you've never heard of before. Margaretha Harmse, a stay-at-home mom. Detective Sergeant Holmes of the Boksburg police station in South Africa, who changed the course of history of that nation. Remember them. We can, each of us, be people like that. If we profess, if we live up to what we profess, to being the beloved community, to be God's kingdom, to be the community of compassion, and to transform the world to reflect that. Let us embrace these teachings. Let us act on them. Let us be God's people as we, realizing that this is not an ordinary time. This is a peculiar time that will ask of us to perhaps do more. That will ask of us, and specifically this congregation, where through the last 5, 6 years, we have assumed leadership in this community to say we want to talk respectfully to each other. We want to embrace dialogue. We want to find common ground. And we want to live in the hope that the common ground is the kingdom of God. That place, that realm where justice is not just a word, but justice and compassion defines the very being and the essence of a community and of the people involved there. May God's Spirit lead us, and may we find the courage in ourselves, the conviction to apply ourselves to this task, so that peace may be more than a word, and God's kingdom may come through us. Amen.